Hello and welcome to episode 99 of the Confident at Work podcast. I'm your host and confidence coach, Anna Manning. And today we're talking about how to handle interactions with confident people. Now, this might seem like a bit of a weird episode for me to be doing. And you're probably listening to this podcast because you want to feel more confident at work. But because I'm a confidence coach, I spend quite a bit of time having conversations with people about the stuff that they struggle with, about the moments that they don't feel as confident as they would like. And this topic has been coming up recently. Maybe someone's in a situation where they're one on one with someone who's very confident. Maybe they're in a meeting session with someone who's very confident. Maybe they're on a panel of people who are very confident, or they're presenting to a board. And this idea or this perception that the people around you are very confident can sometimes create doubt and uncertainty. So I wanted to deal with that up here on the podcast in case you're one of those people that when you are around or interacting at work with people who are very confident or you perceive to be very confident might make you second guess and struggle. So I think struggling to work with people that you perceive to be very confident can stem from various things. I came up with 8 and I'm going to cover them today. But what I'm going to say as a first off is basically it's not about those people. It's actually about you. So when people present this to me as an issue, they're like, oh, it's just when I'm around people like that, those kinds of people. And the way it gets presented to me is if those kind of people are the problem and they're creating this problem for the person that I'm talking to. And that's a tricky one for me because I can't change other people in your life. I cannot change other people in your work world. I cannot change your boss. I cannot change your directors. And neither can you. But the one person that you can change is you. And if this is an issue for you, if you sometimes struggle around confident people, I want to give you 2 things in this podcast. I want to help you to think about why you might struggle with more confident people. I want to give you that insight, but then I want to help you to think about what you can do about it. So I'm going to cover now all the reasons why you might be struggling with more confident people. And as I'm going through these, just listen out and just notice, okay, does that resonate with me? Could that be me? Could that be something that I'm thinking? Because the more insight you've got, the easier it's going to be to do something about it. So the first one that I came up with was to do with intimidation and insecurity. So, and a caveat to what I said earlier, where it's not about them, it's actually about you. You may be kind of conflating the idea of confidence with someone who's actually intimidating, whether they use like their physical presence as a threat or whether they actually use kind of threatening language or behaviors. I'm not talking about that kind of behavior because I don't think that's confidence. I think that's something else entirely. So when I'm talking about intimidation and insecurity, I'm talking about how somebody who is very confident or presents very confidently might make you feel. So you might feel intimidated in the presence of that person, and it might make you start to feel insecure about your abilities or your status. And that can kind of create feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, and that is going to make you retreat into yourself, probably. Some people come out on the offensive, but most of the people that I work with don't. Most people in that situation, if they're feeling that kind of intimidation, which leads to that insecurity, are going to step back and they may just end up inside their own head, not really saying anything, not really engaging. They may sort of mentally check out and say, what's the point, They know best. They've got all the opinions. The next one is around perceived arrogance. So you might be dealing with somebody who you think of as confident, and to you, that might come across as arrogance. So if somebody else is or seems to you to be kind of overly self assured, it can create a perception that maybe they are dismissive or condescending, or they're just a bit too big for their britches. And This can come from all kinds of thinking, but if you want to feel more confident and you want to be more confident, and then you see somebody else who you're like, well, they are very confident, that might look like overconfidence to you. Now, I'm not saying that somebody isn't arrogant, they may be, but they may not be. They may just be quite self assured and confident. And to you, that could feel like overconfidence or arrogance. Number three is to do with communication styles. And when people are feeling confident, and you know, when you're feeling confident, you might be more assertive in your communication. You might be more direct. You might fluff around things less. You might use less qualifying language. And sometimes that can lead to a misunderstanding or a conflict, even if you're not saying it, with somebody because of your perception on who or how they're being because of assertive communication or directness. And that can lead to a kind of dynamic issue between you and another person. The next area is around kind of power dynamics. And this, I think this can be a subtle one, but I think in professional settings, confidence is sometimes associated with authority or with control. So you might expect people as they rise up the ranks, if they're more senior, to be more confident. Now, that's not always the case. My clients come from the most senior to the most junior. So I know that people can feel confident and not confident at all different levels of their career. But if somebody is very confident, it can sometimes, I think, subtly disrupt the idea of how confident a person at a certain level should be. It can disrupt perceived power balances, maybe within a team, maybe within a hierarchy, and that can lead to the person who's feeling less confident and potentially feels like they should be feeling more confident than this person for whatever reason, feeling overshadowed or sidestepped, marginalized. So that's power dynamics. The next one is around a fear of judgment. So this is really to do with how you think that other people might be perceiving you. And I have heard this and coached on this, that if you're working with somebody who is very confident or individuals who are very confident, that might lead to you thinking that you're going to be judged harshly or unfairly by that person if you're not. So if you don't, come across as completely self-assured and completely confident and like you've got everything together, if somebody else is like that, it might lead to you perceiving that they're going to be judging you harshly. Now, they may not. They may not be thinking about that at all. But that can arise in people's minds. And I've seen that arise in people's minds and create even less confidence. So there's that fear of judgment, whether that's perceived or real. The next area is around cultural differences. So definitely different cultures have a different way of expressing themselves and can have different confidence levels. Now, in some cultures, or for some people, a sense of like modesty and humility are really prized over somebody being confident or appearing confident. And you may have been brought up in a culture or a tradition where modesty and humility are really prized and where confidence is actually seen as not great or not appropriate, or it's seen as arrogance. And if that is the background that you've grown up with, or if it's the way in which you've been socialized, and let's say lots of people, even within my cultural context, have been socialized in that way, then confidence in that person to you can look like maybe overconfident or arrogant. So if you have that friction or discomfort when you're interacting with somebody who is very confident, it might kind of go against the way in which you've been socialized to think that people should be or that people should behave. The next one is around competition, rivalry, and I think sometimes when people are very confident or they present very confidently, that can foster a competitive atmosphere. Now, I don't think that always happens, but some people, in response to that, may feel compelled to kind of compete or, prove that they too are extremely confident and they know this and can do that, etc. And that can be tricky in teams, that can be tricky for working relationships, especially since if this is you and you're thinking, God, I have to prove how confident I am in this situation too, it's likely that you're probably not going to be yourself. You might have to be very mindful of the way that you're coming across and what you're saying. So you're going to have to be really self policing all the time, which makes it harder to collaborate, makes it harder to use your executive functions. It just makes everything harder. And you're probably more likely to then be faking things and pretending to be someone you're not, which also can be pretty exhausting. And the last one, when other people are confident or very self assured, it can create a bit of jealousy or envy. And I know that I've felt this before. And I remember being in a situation where I wanted to be able to talk about this thing that I was doing. And I was struggling to do it because I didn't feel that confident in that situation. And then somebody else who was there and who was very confident, obviously talking about something that they were doing, was just speaking freely and they were talking about this thing that they were doing. And as they were doing that, I was like, well, would you look at them? Just chatting on to everyone about everything that they're doing. And I thought, hang on a minute, Anna, you're jealous because actually you want to be able to do that in this situation. And you can't quite bring yourself to do it because you don't feel confident enough and you're not daring to do it. And so now your brain is like, well, would you look at them? Right? It was a bit of jealousy, it was a bit of envy. And obviously that can manifest in different ways, but it can manifest in a kind of passive aggressive behavior or like a lack of cooperation. For me, it definitely manifests as kind of shutting down, sitting back, like mentally thinking, what's the point? Kind of checking out, even though I'm physically there. It can also lead to me thinking, well, stupid idea anyway. It's not something I want to do, right? Which wasn't true. It was something that I wanted to do. But you may recognize some of those. So they are the things that I've thought about that can be picked up when you are dealing with confident people. So it can create intimidation and insecurity. It can give you ideas about people's perceived arrogance. It can make you notice somebody's communication style and think that that's not appropriate. It might subtly shift some power dynamics which may not feel good. It can create in you a fear of judgment. It may show up a cultural or a personality difference, which again may not be easy for you. It can create competition and rivalry, and it can, like my last example, create some jealousy or some envy. And good to notice as I was talking through those whether any of those get created or have been created for you when you've been dealing with people who are confident or who you perceive to be confident. I said at the beginning we were going to cover why you might struggle with more confident people. So, what's actually going on there in you so you could have that insight. And I've talked through some ideas on that. But now we're going to look at what you can actually do about it. Because I'm guessing that you'd still like to feel confident even when you're dealing with confident people. So, what can you do? Well, I think the first thing that you can do is really notice what's happening for you around people who are confident or you perceive to be confident. What is happening? Do you notice yourself behaving in certain ways? Do you notice any of those things that I just talked through happening? Do you notice yourself shutting down or going on the offensive or telling stories about that person in your head, maybe, or maybe gossiping to your work colleagues about them? Do you notice any of that stuff happening? And this can be a difficult thing maybe to own up to, because some of it we're probably not that proud of. Like, I'm not that proud of the fact that in that situation I was being jealous and therefore I was shutting down. I was probably acting like, spoiled child, not that anybody would have known because I was keeping it inside my head, but I knew. And I don't give the examples and help you to think about it so that you can judge yourself for it, because frankly, that is not helpful and it will not help you to take any action and do something differently. Instead, I think it's a good idea to just notice what is happening. So if I give you that example of mine, I noticed that I was going quiet. I noticed that I was judging that person in my head. And I noticed that my brain decided it was a stupid idea to try and talk about what I was doing anyway. And why would I even do that? Even though that was something I definitely wanted to do. So once I noticed that all of that was happening, I could at least be on to myself. So let's say that was happening and it was completely unconscious. I don't have a cat in hell's chance of doing anything differently. Apart from, going home and being pissed off, I didn't talk about the thing and they're thinking that that person was an idiot and that they were arrogant and all the rest of it. Because really, they weren't any of those things. They were just doing what I wanted to do and I couldn't bring myself to do it. So notice for you, if you can identify a situation like mine where dealing with somebody who you perceive to be very confident created difficulties for you, what were those difficulties? What was the drama that got created in your head? What were you thinking about them or the situation or yourself? Because very often there will be something lurking behind, which is actually more to do with you than it is to do with them. But you're going to have to notice what's happening before you can do anything about it. So again, using that example that I just gave you, lurking behind me going quiet and mentally judging that person for doing what I wanted to do and then deciding that it was a stupid idea and I never wanted to do it anyway, lurking behind all of that was my disappointment and my comparison and my judgment. And to top it off, probably also some of my own criticism about myself and how I should be. Now, notice that that might have been quite subtle and in the background because my brain was making it all about this person in front of me and what an idiot they were. But actually, that wasn't really about them. It was about me. So when you're interacting and dealing with somebody who's confident and that's creating a problem for you, it's probably not about that person. Just like me, it's probably more about you. So, what is it you're thinking about you in that situation? And if I look at my situation, I was thinking, I should be able to do this and I can't. I'm not as good as this person. I'm never going to be successful like this person. They are better than me. I am rubbish. I'm never going to be able to do this. Maybe I shouldn't have tried, right? So it brings up that comparison, me versus them. It brings up my doubt, my self doubt, and has me questioning myself and my abilities and my presence in that room and whether I'm going to be able to make a success of something. And then it brings up my own criticism about the fact that I'm not good at this and I'm not good at that and I can't do this and I can't do that. And then it also means that I don't notice anything that I did do well in that environment. All I noticed and all I focused on was this one thing that didn't feel good that I missed out. And if you're used to listening to me, you may notice that all of those things that I just talked about, so comparison, self doubt, self criticism, a failure to notice anything I did well, are all components of a low confidence cycle. I will leave a link in the show notes to a low confidence and a high confidence cycle so you can click in there and look at it now if you want as I go through this. But what this situation indicates to me is that you may be in a low confidence cycle. It may just be showing up the fact that you're actually in a low confidence cycle and that you are possibly managing yourself quite poorly. So you're being quite self-critical. Things are bringing up self-doubt. You may then have an over-focus on how you're being perceived. You're creating a lot of internal pressure. You may have unrealistic standards. You may think, I should be able to do this. I should be able to do this perfectly. Why can't I? You may be having that comparison about yourself, which is usually negative. And then that third part of the confidence cycle, a failure to acknowledge good work, you may be just focusing on all your negatives and forgetting the good stuff you did, like I did in that meeting. There may be no internal validation, but there's a lot of internal judgment, right? All of that was happening for me in that moment. I was in that low confidence cycle and it was not good. So if you think, this is a bit of a problem for me, I encourage you to click into the show notes and look at that low confidence cycle and say, okay, am I in that situation? And if you haven't already, there is also a link in the show notes. Go and take the confidence assessment. It's free and it is going to identify any low confidence habits which you can change. So first thing that you need to do about the situation, if you want to do something about the fact that confident people might be a struggle or a challenge for you, is notice what's happening. Notice those feelings and those responses that it's bringing up in you, and notice what's underneath it. What are you making it mean about you? And then I want you to notice whether you are at that moment or more generally stuck in a low confidence cycle. And when you know all of that, the next thing is to think about how you can shift some of those low confidence cycle habits so that you can generally get into a higher confidence cycle, because you could try and do a lot of stuff which would rectify this one particular issue. But to me, this particular issue is just indicative of the fact that you may be in a low confidence cycle, and trying to do a sticking plaster over this particular issue is not really a holistic view of things. If you're going to take a holistic view of things, you want to think about how you go from those low confidence cycle habits into high confidence cycle habits. And then more confident people are not going to be as much of a problem for you. In the interim, I want you to think about how you would like to feel when you are with very confident people, when you are interacting with very confident people. Is it you'd like to feel confident yourself? Would you like to not really even notice how other people are? Would you like to stay in your own lane? Would you like to just be able to do whatever it is you're there to do? Right? Whatever that is for you, decide how is it you want to feel? What do you want to be happening when you're interacting with really confident people? And what would you have to be thinking about the fact that some people are very confident in order to feel that way? So if you want to feel neutral, what would you need to be thinking about the fact that you're interacting with very confident people? Probably not very much at all. Probably like, yeah, they're confident people. Shoulder shrug. This doesn't create much of an emotional reaction for you. Doesn't create a lot of insecurity. Doesn't create a lot of jealousy. It's just okay. And imagine if you want to be in that situation and you want to feel confident, what is it that you'd have to be thinking and believing? Well, it could be something like, I belong in this room. I belong in this conversation. I belong at this table. Maybe it's remembering that you're an expert and that you've got something to add. And that might lead to you feeling confident when you're dealing with confident people. So, I hope that's helpful. If you struggle to deal with more confident people, I would suspect that there is other aspects of confidence that you're struggling with too, because I don't think this is a one-off. I think it's part of a holistic problem. And you want to find out whether you're in that low confidence cycle and what is creating it. That is my best advice for you, that you can really understand what is creating that low confidence cycle, so you've got a chance of getting out of it. Once you're out of it, you're probably going to feel fine that other people are quite confident. You might even enjoy it. All right, that is all I have for you this week. Next week is going to be episode 100, which is kind of exciting for me. I have been podcasting for 2 years. You may have been listening to me for 2 years. Thank you if you are a new listener, and thank you if you are an old listener. Great to have you here. And I hope that you will subscribe and stay connected with the podcast in that way. And I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.